welcome to the One Zen Academy Fitness Podcast. Everything health, wellness, fitness and performance all under one roof. My name's Kieran. I've got over 15 years worth of experience within personal training, health, wellness and sports rehabilitation. For more information, go to www.onezenacademy.com. Thank you. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the One Zen Fitness Podcast. My name's Kieran. I'll be taking you through what should be a bit of an exploration into yoga for running, strength training and just general recovery. But before we do, I just want to give a shout out to Jeremy Seaton for donating a deep sea diver for our US audience. A deep sea diver is a $5. So £5 was donated via our crowdfunding page. For those of you who are unaware, which is probably most of you to be fair, we do have a crowdfunding page which allows us to do this podcast. So if you do want to donate anything, any donations, you get a shout out, and there's various extra bits you may receive if you donate more. And the actual page is Patreon, that's patron.podbean, podbean.com. So that's patron.podbean.com/One Zen Fitness. If you go to that page and donate what you can, it will be very much appreciated, and you will receive my love through this podcast. I thank you. But let's begin the actual podcast, because otherwise you'll switch off and get bored. So, first of all, it's kind of, why is yoga beneficial for running? Because a lot of people are starting to do it. So, I know where I live, yogis, for instance, are promoting yoga for running. There's a lot more people these days who are running because it's accessible to a lot of people. But why is it beneficial? Why are more runners taking up yoga? Also, kind of, should other areas of fitness, competitive sport, do some form of yoga? Short answer, yes, but there may be a long-winded answer. Let's take a bit of a deep dive into the why. So why is yoga beneficial for running? Well, first of all, let's take a look at what happens during distance running. So the physiology tries to maintain balance or get back to it to optimize its own performance. So we generally call this homeostasis. So it's the balance of all the internal workings in your body. Our nervous system, on the other hand, is made up of two main parts, and we call that the somatic and autonomic. I'm sure you can guess what autonomic means. It's like having an automatic car, for instance. So the somatic are things that we control, so our muscular system, for instance, and our autonomic are the things that we don't have to think about, like heart rate and so on. And our nervous system controls these. So when we kind of delve into it, we know that the autonomic system is also divided into two other parts, and we generally call this the sympathetic nervous system or the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is our freeze, fight or flight response. It's the weird way I used to remember it is I sympathize with your war, like a war sympathizer. Controversial maybe. Most people recognize this as a stress or their main stress response. Our parasympathetic is the opposite. It's the rest and digest response, or breed and feed, depending on kind of how kinky you want to get with it, really. And this is generally our recovery phase. So mirrored with this are hormones, and we call the hormonal system your endocrine system. So generally referred to categorically as the neuroendocrine system. These are chemical messengers which tell different areas of the bodies to process and activate or deactivate various systems. So they really do kind of tell everything what's going on at any particular time. And these can seemingly work for you or work against you, depending on how you view it. And these two systems influence each other. And like I alluded to, we call it nerve, and endocrine hormone, neuroendocrine. So why does this matter? Why am I banging on about it? Well, funny you should mention that. When we run excessively or complete excessive cardio in our bid to get fitter, healthier, run a marathon and so on. I know the London Marathon has just happened. And we automatically assume it's healthy to do these things. But there is always a but. It seems great, you must be getting fitter and healthier. But unfortunately, it just isn't so true. Or maybe, you've been missold a little bit. It's actually dose dependent. So if I do too much too soon, and it gets excessive, and we generally call this chronic cardio, it causes what we call a catabolic reaction, and catabolic just means to break down. Catabolic reaction, and that is our sympathetic nervous system, and it governs our body and our mind. Again, it's our freeze, fight or flight response. So if I've just smashed it in the gym and I've just run 90 minutes on the treadmill, which I do see, it may not be doing me any favors, is ultimately the point. It may seem like more is better, but unfortunately it's not. Everything's more on a U-curve. Okay, everything's more on a U-curve. So when we go into a little bit more, this then tells the hormonal system to increase catabolic hormones. This causes our HPA axis, so that's our hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis, to activate. If you're not sure what the HPA axis is, if you go back and listen to our very first podcast, so podcast 1, I kind of talk about it fairly extensively. So it activates our HPA axis. At the bottom of this axis is our hormone called cortisol, which is released in times of stress. And it's released from your adrenal glands, which are at the top of your kidneys. Its job is to keep you going, in essence. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if it becomes, again, it's more of a dose-dependent issue. So it's important that I do get a release of cortisol, but chronic cortisol usage, unfortunately, can increase circulating sugar levels. And it does this by a method called gluconeogenesis. And basically, that's a fancy way of saying we're making sugar from other things. So we're creating sugar, whether it's from mainly from protein and broken down protein sources like muscle tissue, for instance. So we know higher rates of the chronic cardio and stress rates and so on, you'll find that this actually leads to higher breathing rates. And you'll know when someone's really stressed if you just sit with them and you see their chest going up and down. And most people arguably should be between 5 to 10 breaths per minute. You'll find that in stressed people, they bust out 5 to 10 breaths normally in the space of half that time. So it's a very good indicator of kind of what's happening in the body. You may find that with increasing breathing rates and so on, you get racing thoughts. And this is something that I've been prone to before. Racing thoughts, you've got 101 things on your mind. Everything feels a bit overwhelming. You get increases in anxiety. And after running, very low energy. Okay, very low energy. If you don't believe me, just look at all the people who finished a marathon yesterday. And don't get me wrong, I've got a lot of respect for marathon runners. I've run a few myself, but you have nothing left. You are very depleted. And that's after a marathon. Should that really be happening after every training session? The short answer is no, by the way. I know it seems like a good thing. We do definitely find increases in things like injury rates and atrophy in muscles and increases in body fat, which almost seems counterproductive to the cardio. So you bust out cardio in a bid to get fitter, healthier, lose weight and so on. But actually the opposite can occur. So you may find that a lot of distance runners who are not professional runners, I might add, will have higher percentages of body fat and fairly low muscle tissue. Again, it's because of this constant catabolic reaction that's happening, coupled with huge amounts of sugar in the blood. So after I'm doing my chronic cardio, a lot of people may get increased appetite and they'll hit the carbohydrates and they'll eat excessive carbohydrates. I've nothing against carbohydrates, by the way, but they may eat excessive carbohydrates that they don't need to use. You have high cortisol anyway, which is creating sugar. So really you're getting sugar on sugar with high insulin rates. Okay, so we know that this can lead down the road of chronic inflammation, disease, and so on. We know, and again, please don't take my word for it. You can look this up. There's an increasing amount of professional triathletes, marathon runners, and so on, who are starting to develop things like type 2 diabetes, or who are deemed at risk. So they have a higher natural sugar level. So we may do like a test like HbA1c, which measures the sugar in your red blood cell. And on this, ideally, you want to be around 34 below, arguably. I know there's probably a bit of argument around that number. But what we're seeing is for triathletes, your endurance runners and so on, is that they're actually in the 40s, like 41, 42. And arguably, they would then qualify for, in the UK, the National Diabetes Prevention Programme, because they're deemed at risk. And they may think, well, I'm, like a professional runner. I'm busting out, a 2.5 hour marathon, or, a sub 9 hour Ironman, or whatever it is. But the reality is, there's something within all of that that's not right, and we have to appreciate that extremes of exercise are very catabolic. And you'll see this reflected in a lot of runners, especially on a Saturday morning park run, for instance. You'll see it reflected there. Again, just don't take my word for it. Just have a look around. So how many runners do you see with strapping, for instance, super cushion shoes, but have really loud impact when they're running? So, I know it, because it seems a bit of a strange concept to me. So, my background is sports rehabilitation primarily. So when you see someone running for fun, in essence, that's what a early morning park run is, a fun run, I guess. Well, what's with all the heavy strapping around knees? What's with all the super cushion trainers? Why are you not learning the skill of running? It just doesn't make sense, really. So in my view, it's all about lack of knowledge and shortcuts. But they'll keep doing this, and then they'll do the chronic cardio, which breaks down things more. The injuries won't recover, and they go around in this cycle, unfortunately. And unfortunately, the payoff from that is atrophy of muscles and increase in amounts of fat storage. That's just the payoff. But again, don't take my word for it. Just have a look around. So I've been banging on about that for ages, but I haven't once mentioned yoga. So where does yoga fit in before I rant anymore? Well, the reason why I wanted to kind of paint that picture is because practices like yoga create the opposite reaction. Okay, so instead of creating a catabolic like chronic cardio would, yoga creates more of an anabolic environment to build back up. Okay, so instead of sympathetic, your freeze, fight or flight response, it's parasympathetic. Okay, so it's that breathe and feed, it's that rest and digest. So why does that matter really? You may be thinking, well, on my days that I'm not running, I'm resting. It's not actually the same. My question to you would be, what are you doing to stimulate the parasympathetic response? Because I don't know about you, but I get bored quite a lot. And boredom is actually a stress on the body, unbelievably. And again, don't believe me, if you've got kids, watch what happens when they're bored. They're distraught. Okay, they're distraught. And it's the same in adults. I was going to say the same in humans. Sometimes I wonder. It's the same in adults, but we obviously deal with it in different ways. We internalize it more. So I'll give you this analogy, for instance. It's pointless building an extension on your home in the middle of a hurricane. So what do I mean by that? The hurricane obviously represents your stress response, your sympathetic response. So in the middle of that hurricane, how could my physiology possibly think about building an extension, improving ourselves, recovering, and all these things? It wouldn't. Everything would be put on hold to deal with the hurricane, to deal with the stress response that's happening. And that's unfortunate. So it just means that you can't recover, you can't become stronger. So these things are always put on hold, and obviously things break down. So imagine health and fitness as a bank account. A withdrawal from your health bank account might be training at a higher or longer intensity. Another withdrawal might be not eating enough quality organic nutrition. Another withdrawal might be you're constantly dehydrated. Another withdrawal might be lack of sleep, so you have to kind of tax the rest of your body for it, or not living the life that you want. This all sounds like, fairly mundane stuff, really. But another withdrawal might be living in polluted areas. You get the idea. So we constantly make these withdrawals throughout the day. But what are we doing to put back into our health account? So paying into your health account could be eating quality, nutritionally dense organic produce. It could be getting the right quality and quantity of sleep that you need. It could be making sure that you have pure filtered water going into your body. It also is things like yoga, Tai Chi, meditation. These things put back into your health account so you get a better balance overall. I promise you now, we are all very, very good at making those withdrawals. We do it very well chronically. And this is really important to know, because you could be a power lifter listening to this right now thinking, yoga's too easy, what's it going to give me? It's going to give you the chance to recover from your workout so you lift stronger. If you're a runner, it's going to give you the chance to recover from your workouts and strengthen the fixator muscles, the synergist muscles that allow you to run to make you a better runner. If you're a bodybuilder, if you're a skydiver, whatever you look at, it can benefit you as a person. Even if you're just, I say even if, it's probably the hardest job, if you're a parent and you just want time for yourself to recover from the stresses and strains of life, then this is for you. And that's the beauty of yoga. It's fully inclusive and anyone and everyone can get something out of it. Yoga is an efficient way of topping up your health and your recovery account. Now, there's no exact evidence on yoga makes you a better runner, for instance. There's no exact evidence, I'm sure it's a matter of time before someone studies it. So it's more than likely more of an indirect effect. But it will make you better at recovering. So you can then run harder and longer if you want. I would suggest you train smarter, not harder, but that's just me. So I mentioned the health account. Now, yoga itself has its own terminology, and I think sometimes this puts people off. So for things which engages some people, but switches off, what I mean by that is some of the terminology is, well, it can seem a bit wishy-washy, or it can seem a bit, I know when I first started getting into I know when I first started getting into yoga, someone referred to me as a tree hugger. I was like, yeah, I quite like, hugging a tree now and then. Why not? If you've never done it, give it a go. It actually feels quite nice, to be fair. But this has been the major issue with yoga, isn't it? It's perception. It's sometimes certain practices of yoga are unwilling to compromise as well, to kind of be extremely more relevant in the 21st century. So I'll talk in both yogic terms, if you're into that, and layman's terms for different perspective. So I'll give you this idea. So instead of your health account, you could call it your prana account. Okay, so prana is a yogic term. It means life force, energy. Okay, so they're the same thing in essence. It's just the flow of energy. But sometimes when, you go to a yoga class and they're talking about the flow of prana and they're talking in that voice, for a lot of people I know, it could be extremely off-putting because they don't believe in it. They just want to get the bits out of it, but it turns them off. But yeah, prana is just life force, your energy, more worldly or bigger than that. It's the energy of the universe. And again, straight away, as soon as you start saying energy of the universe, people switch off. Or some people, like myself, will switch on. I think, yeah, brilliant. I like that terminology. So bear in mind that cosmology and physics, as proved, in essence, you are made from stars. Literally made from stars. Just before you turn off. So I want to make clear, it's been shown, it's been proven, the same atoms that make you up make the rest of the universe up. So we'll just have to get over that. So when we talk about prana, it's really breath or respiration, the inward and outward breath. When you take in the breath, it's about where it goes in your body and so on. So that's really how we're going to talk to it. And there's said to be 5 main parts to this. So the 5 parts are the inward breath, obviously, downward and outward of the breath. So imagine as you take the breath in, it goes down and out. So it kind of expands out. Thirdly, from outward to center, then upward and outward. So basically you take the breath in, it expands out all over your body. And then as soon as it's made it out, it comes back to the center, moves upward and outward through your nose or mouth. So they're the 5 main parts. And again, when we look at prana and the 5 parts, you may think, it sounds a bit, too simple. Well, that's because it is, to be fair. So if you ever hear some other terminology, could be something like the nadis, which just means channel of prana, then really we're just looking at where it's flowing to. And that's all nadis mean. Okay, then we have things like bandhas, which is a way to direct prana through contraction, which is great, to be fair, and to be practiced. If you never practiced it before, I would strongly recommend it. And bandha just means to hold or tighten. And out of the 4 main bandha, or locks, as they're sometimes referred to, there's a couple I practice that have really helped me, to be fair. So the first one is the throat lock. It sounds like a jiu-jitsu move, I know. The throat lock. So if you're practicing this at home, you sit comfortably, spine upright but relaxed. Ideally, you want to be crossed legs, okay, or sitting in that very stereotypical position. You close your eyes, inhale slowly and deeply, and then retain your breath, i.e. hold your breath. Whilst you retain your breath, bend your head forward, press your chin against your chest, then place your hands on your knees, lock your arms, hunch your shoulders upward and forward, and then after a few seconds, release slowly, and obviously breathe. So that's the throat lock. So just to go through that again, and obviously I said close your eyes. If you're driving listening to this, please don't do it. Just as a top tip, closing your eyes whilst driving is frowned upon. So the throat lock, sit comfortably, upright but relaxed, cross your legs, close your eyes, inhale slowly and deeply, retain your breath, hands on knees, lock elbows, press your chin against your chest, hunch your shoulders. After a few seconds, release and inhale. Easy. I promise you now, at home, it's great for mental relaxation and relieving stress. I don't fully understand how it works. I'm going to be quite honest about it, but it definitely works. Okay, of that I can guarantee. Then another lock or banda I use is called the Mula banda, i.e. is talking about your perineum. So basically, as you're breathing slowly and rhythmically, you contract your perineum as if you need to go to the toilet. And that's basically, there's various stages to this. That's stage one. So you sit, nice posture. It can be cross legs. It can be however you want to be fair. So you're breathing in slowly and rhythmically, so regulating your breathing, and you contract your perineum as if you need to go to the toilet and relax. That's stage one. That's quite an easy one. If you're okay with that, you can do a combination actually of the perineum and throat lock, which I'm quite fond of. This in particular, I've noticed improves energy and definitely relieves depression. Again, I don't pretend to know why. I'm sure, I know there's a yogic philosophy and explanation, but I'm more of a case of science meets Eastern philosophy. So I've yet to find, real conclusive, this is why. But I know it does work, and that's good enough for me. So if you do like the throat lock with the perineum at the same time, so you lock your throat and squeeze your perineum for the same duration. So you start with a few seconds, but the idea is that you build it up for as long as you can do comfortably. And then obviously you release both and inhale. So other yogic ways of increasing mental well-being and improving recovery would be the use of things like inversions, for instance. And if you went to any yogic class and you went there specifically because you were a runner, you may think in terms of, and this is quite common actually, you want to strengthen certain muscles in running. Okay, and that's the general thought process. I'm a bit controversial here because I would say that's bullshit, honestly. You strengthen your muscles through the act of your running. And if you want more strength and you want to improve running economy and injury prevention, then you would do some form of strength training. And I do mean actual strength training, not circuit training. Circuit training is just more of the same that you were going to do outside. I've never really understood the concept of runners whose idea of weight training is circuit training. It's not really the same thing. So let me be clear. If you're a distance runner, triathlete, whatever it is, endurance sports, okay, your main strengthening and skill-based activity is your running, is your swimming, is your cycling. To complement that, do weight training. To recover more efficiently from all of that, then you incorporate yoga. but do not go into yoga looking to strengthen. It will not really give you what you want. Okay, and I know that might be controversial. I know many yoga teachers kind of talk in terms of strengthening muscles and so on. You're aligning things better and you're becoming more mindful. And if you are unconditioned, for instance, you will get a degree of strength out of it, but that's not the point. It's not to strengthen the muscles, it's to strengthen the deep body and the mind as a whole. And again, you can go as deep into that as you need to, really. But it's not really to strengthen muscles. It's to improve recovery. Hence why I'm talking about doing locks, breath work, and inversions rather than your stereotypical asana. Okay, so in inversions, for instance, a simple inversion, and again, I've seen enhanced recovery and better mobility through certain joints with this. So that is a crossover. So the first one is the stereotypical one, downward facing dog. It's the stereotypical bum high up in the air, feet planted down, hands planted down. Okay. Another favorite is a shoulder stand. Okay, so if you don't know what these are, it's obviously hard to explain on a podcast, but I would recommend look them up or work with a yoga teacher who can show you and take you through, because some of these inversions, if you've never done them before, you may topple over and injure yourself. So if you're doing any of these, make sure you've got a mat and make sure you've got plenty of space around you, and don't do anything that you feel you can't do without supervision, that is. Okay, so the shoulder stand, then into the plow position. So a shoulder stand, my head and neck will basically be on the floor. The rest of my body will be towering above me, and my hands will be supporting my back, for instance. Okay, so again, it sounds a bit weird to explain on a podcast. A plow would be bring my legs down and then up and over. So I'm basically now looking into my groin area. And that's really a plow. And I've noticed that you really start to stretch the fascia from what we call the deep posterior fascia from the base of your neck all the way down to your plantar fascia in your foot. I found that very, very effective, to be fair. So most of the effects are anecdotal, but it is 5,000 years of anecdotal evidence. Myself, it was a hard sell for me at first to do any sort of yoga, but then because I felt and saw the benefits almost instantly, I've never looked back, to be fair. And I would argue this with anyone. So when you're doing inversions, for instance, increases in blood flow to the brain region, but just the fact that you're trying to relax and do something challenging at the same time, like learning a new skill, can increase things like BDNF, which is your brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is the fertilizer for your brain. Again, I discussed that in my very first podcast, so if you're not sure what that is, go back to that one. But I guess on from that, when we look at yoga for running, mental health, recovery, we could probably spend all day, to be fair, talking about the various aspects. But let me take a bit of a dive into at least one, maybe 4 asana, to be fair. So the most important asana, or the pose, is one that's completely overlooked because people think it's easy, and that's Savasana. In essence, you are lying on your back on the ground with your arms out by your side and your legs apart. Sounds incredibly straightforward, okay? But get this, it isn't just to relax. It's to create the right state for you to become the antenna to receive energy from the rest of the universe. Again, think about the terminology. All I'm saying is that if you don't go within, you're going to go without. So really what I'm saying is a way of meditation to prepare your mind for what's about to happen. So, but this can't happen if you overlook what seems to be a simplistic asana. You know, let's face it, if you can't just be and breathe properly and go within and create stillness, then what chance do you really have in moving, trying to regulate your breath at higher thresholds when you're running or weightlifting, let alone moving into various other asana? And I think it's really the key point from all of this is that we're trying to focus on the training of something. You know, it could be marathon running, it could be, you know, lifting maximum weights. But if I can't be comfortable being still, if I can't be comfortable just breathing properly, like big diaphragmatic breaths, regulating breath in and out through my nose, then really what chance would I have in moving? And for me, when we look at injury rates, for instance, and I know I'm moving off on tangents, but when we look at injury rates, for instance, and in my own clinical practice, the main thing I noticed was the inability for someone to actually use their diaphragm. And I would assess areas, if someone come in with a knee injury, I would do a full kind of objective assessment on the knee. I would also do an objective assessment on the ankle and on the hip. Okay, and I would, we would write that down and assess it to see what's actually going on. But I would also look at the more broad scope. I would more often not get them to lie down. And most of the clients would believe that I'm probably looking at their knee. But actually, I'm looking at their breathing. I'm looking at how they're breathing right now, where they're carrying tension, what's actually happening more globally. If it wasn't an impact injury, how did they really get injured? I want to know about your nutrition. I want to know about your hydration. I want to know basically everything that you interact with, because that's what caused the injury. And I know that seems kind of non-scientific, but I promise you it's the opposite. It is the opposite. I know full well that when I've got people's diaphragms working properly, for instance, that there's this instant relief, and they'll normally go, oh, and they'll give me one of those. And that's a really good sign that they've just let go of something, whatever it is. I've been, plagued with injuries my whole life. I get injured quite easy, to be fair. But I also can recover and recoup very easy, because I understand and reflect on if I've got injured or if I'm not increasing. I enjoy running. So if I go out for a run and I'm not improving in running, I don't do what a lot of people do and just plow through it and keep going. I would reflect on why. Why isn't it? Why is it not gone the way I thought it would go? What do I need to do to improve? What do I need to do differently? The answer, most of the time, is not train harder. I promise you that. You'll hear that from a lot of personal trainers. You'll hear it from a lot of physios. You'll hear it from a lot of people who, are very well experienced. And it's not that. First, you must train smarter. Later, if you need to, you would train harder where appropriate. It's not exactly rolls off the tongue as a saying, but you get the idea. It's, we need to come away from smashing it out, purging ourselves mentally. You'll see this every January. Okay, people will come off the back of Christmas and they will purge themselves. They will go on a diet that's massively restrictive with hardly any nutrition, and they will thrash it out on some high intensity class. And I've got nothing against high intensity classes, but why are you really doing it? And most people are doing it because they're guilt ridden. They feel they need to purge themselves. And even if you listen to people's terminology they use, they'll say things like, I need to go on a detox. And by very definition, they're suggesting that they are toxic. And that's the issue, isn't it? It's like I go shopping, food shopping, and I'll go into a shop and there'll be this little tiny section. It says healthier foods. And again, in my head, I'm like, by default, you're saying that the other foods are less healthy. So most of your shop is unhealthy, is what you're saying. But even in the healthier foods, really, it's all vegetarian and vegan foods. But they're still heavily processed foods. And in my head, because I've had this discussion quite a bit, they'll say, what's wrong with vegetarian and vegan foods? And I'll say, well, nothing, but I've just come from the vegetarian and vegan aisles. You know, they don't need any kind of fancy marketing. It's where all the veg is, and it's where all the fruit is. You know, it's where all the green leafy stuff is. That doesn't need fancy marketing. Hardly any of it is in packaging, but I still know what it is. That's where the health food is. You have to then rummage through the food aisles to find actually the healthy food, like little diamonds, in the rough, so to speak. And I know I've gone off on a tangent, but ultimately my point is, with yoga is part of paying back into your health account, along with other things. And the whole point of yoga is to change the way you live. So yoga is not just a class, it's a way of life. It starts and ends with the breath, and everything in between is yoga. And this is really important. That's why Savasana, lying down, for me, is not a cop-out. It's the hardest asana, depending on how deep you want to go. And that's really the key. But if you were going to twist my arm and you wanted some other asana to focus on, maybe you are a runner, maybe you are a weightlifter and so on, then I would say things like the tree pose. Tree pose is quite accessible. So that's, again, if you think about stereotypical poses you may have seen, that's the one where you're standing on one leg. Your other leg is, your other foot is just slightly above the knee of your stance leg, and you're in prayer pose, or arms out to the side, or arms above you. And the tree pose is very good at opening up the hips, but more importantly, it really starts to get your stability and get the left and right hemispheres of your brain working together. I guess a couple of favorites of mine are eagle pose, purely because I like the way things wrap around, and having quite big legs, I find it quite challenging because of the muscle tissue that's in the way. And the other one would be kind of warrior 3, which is kind of your T-shaped pose, where you're on one leg, tilting forward, extending through your back leg. So these sorts of poses are things that I would use if I worked with any athletes and I wanted to give them especially some homework. Because balancing not only enhances proprioception is knowing where your arms and legs are in space and time, but also how your left and right hemispheres in your brain start working together. And we know in things like mental health, like depression and anxiety, for instance, it's very easy for us to lose focus purely when we're chronically stressed. The hippocampus part of your brain, so that's the part where we kind of learn new information. When we're chronically stressed, or anxious or depressed, and again, this can be from chronically overtraining, chronic cardio and so on, it will atrophy and you'll lose the ability to learn new information, so it will become too small. Whilst the part of your brain called the amygdala, which is your emotional center, that tends to be overactive. And this is why you get people who become fairly illogical, so to speak. Or if you train chronically too much, you may get certain cravings for sugary food, and you shouldn't, but you do anyway because you're stimulating this stress response. So most people tend to default to old habits because they can't access their prefrontal cortex, which is our logical reason, new ideas, and so on. So movement can be challenging as well because we start compromising other areas of the brain. So by doing lots of balance asana and inversions as well, you can kind of jumpstart this process, like jumpstarting your car, and claim back some clarity of thought. And this is just what I found for myself as well. This is information that's out there, but this is something that I've practiced myself. I know it works. So, I'd be more than happy to kind of give that to anyone really. And just on a few final thoughts. Things like I mentioned proprioception, which is knowing where you are in space and time. We have a thing called interoception, which is kind of the inwards process of knowing and feeling what the rest of my inward body is doing. And we know when we challenge our bodies in different positions, especially in inversions, we create better bodily awareness, like internally. It may not seem like anything major now, but it will allow you to engage in running a lot easier. If you're, going into a powerlifting competition, you're about to do a deadlift, it will allow you to engage internally a lot better and focus your mind. And also we stimulate things like the flow of prana, as well as increasing oxygen to our brain and so on. So all of this together is pretty useful. And like I said, it's stuff I've practiced myself. I would strongly encourage anyone to do it. I will also be starting a yoga class physically soon, but I'll be doing some pre-recorded yoga sessions as well, which I'll let you guys know when that's ready. But in that time, don't be afraid to kind of research kind of ways that yoga can help you improve, whether you're a distance runner or a sprinter, a weightlifter, bodybuilder, high competitor, or even just, you're just thinking, I need to find a way, an outlet to de-stress. I promise you it will help loads. On from that, it's crucial then to kind of focus on things like breath work. So at a bare minimum, 5 minutes a day of just breath work. Okay, and what I mean by breath work is sitting or lying down somewhere comfortably and just focusing on breathing in and out through your nose. And as you breathe in, you're allowing your diaphragm to contract, which means your belly will grow. And as you breathe out through your nose, allow your stomach to come back in. Okay, and just focusing on the sensation of the inward and outward breath for 5 minutes really calms down any racing thoughts, really starts to calm down the sympathetic nervous system to regain some clarity. If you wanted to push the boat out a little bit more and you wanted some extra health benefits, then you can practice retention of breath. Like I said, you don't have to do any of the banders, the locks. But what you can do is sit comfortably as you breathe in, allow your stomach to expand and hold your breath. At first, just hold it for 5 to 10 seconds. Breathe out for as long as you can. So try and really lengthen the time that breath comes out, and then try and retain that part of your breath for 5 to 10 seconds before breathing back in again. If it's too much, just lessen the time. If it's too easy, you can increase the time. But what the breath hold actually does, it compresses the spleen, so you produce more red blood cells, which is pretty awesome, to be fair. Free divers have known this for years. I encourage anyone to do it. I do this in between sets in the gym as well. And whether it's a placebo effect or not, it works. So I really don't care if it's a placebo or not. I know if I'm doing a heavy deadlift session, I rest for about 2 minutes. I do breath holds throughout that, which I promise you sounds counterintuitive because you think I need to replace oxygen. Your body will always have a workaround. If you withhold oxygen, it'll just find a way to become more efficient without oxygen. Okay, so it'll produce more red blood cells. It will produce more enzymes that allow you to utilize less oxygen. It's the same it's a similar principle, I should say, as training at altitude, or people that live 3,000 meters above sea level. Your body will adjust over time because it won't have what it needs. So imagine everything is a form of training, and your body and mind can ultimately adapt to anything, but we just need to give it the right resources and the right materials to do so. So I hope that's given you something to think about. Like I said, and in the opening, definitely still a second shout out to Jeremy Seaton for his deep sea diver donation. Remember, deep sea diver, $5. I know. And if you do want to donate, if you feel that the information that we give is of benefit to you, and if you feel that you want us to keep doing what we're doing, because at the moment it is a labor of love, and you think, do you know what, I really appreciate what One Zen Fitness is doing, and let's keep moving forward, let's spread the love, then please go to patreon.podbean.com/One Zen Fitness, and I will give you a big shout out, and I will send you love through the airwaves. So any further information, please go to www.onezenacademy.com. That's onezenacademy.com. If you're ever interested in becoming a personal trainer, sports therapist, or you want some online personal training, so I can train you from anywhere in the world to improve health, fitness, well-being, performance, whatever your goal is, we can definitely help you. So my name's Kieran, I'm signing out. Thank you for listening to the One Zen Fitness Academy podcast. My name's been Kieran. Please share with your friends, leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Thank you for your time.